Absolutely, sir.
Well, I don't hear that in the list, and I don't hear that in the process of determining whether Section 907 should be waived. If we allow, for whatever reasons, whatever security, border security, counter-narcotics, for ethnic cleansing to take place, and we look the other way, we send a global message of what our priorities are. We say to others in the world, you can do that as long as you work with us on counter-narcotics, border security, and other such things. That would be a horrific, horrific result of a policy that would be blindsided to the fundamental proposition that if there's a country in the world that stands for human rights, it's the United States of America. I've listened to our president, who both when I sat over there, when he was the chairman of this committee, and when he was vice president, and of course as president, has spoken about the importance as part of the fabric of our foreign policy in terms of human rights. But speaking of it is meaningless. It is a hollow promise without action. So I don't know how we can see a positive result under Section 907 when we have the violations of the 2020 ceasefire. I don't see how we can have a positive result when we have the amassing of troops by Azerbaijan. I don't see how we can have a positive result when Azerbaijan kills in cold blood unarmed Armenian soldiers and sexually abuses and mutilates a female Armenian soldier. I don't understand how Section 907 leads to a more peaceful resolution when they are in the verge of ethnically cleansing 120,000 Armenians in Karabakh. I don't understand it. I don't understand how one can stretch the proposition of what Congress meant in Section 907 that way. And so when I hear you dictate what are the elements, well, those elements don't cover the dire consequences that are happening right now. Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. Secretary Kim, I have to say I share the concerns that have been expressed about Azerbaijan's continued obstruction of the Lachen Corridor. In New Hampshire, we have a large Armenian diaspora, and we hear consistently from them about their concerns that Azerbaijan's blockade has resulted in severe humanitarian suffering, that it should be lifted immediately. And as probably one of the few members of Congress who's actually spent some time in Armenia, I have to say, this is a problem that we ought to be able to help resolve. One of the things that I know would be helpful would be for the Senate to confirm the ambassador to Azerbaijan. I think it would really be helpful for us to have an ambassador there who can make the case for why we need to address what's happening in Nagorno-Karabakh. So I hope that the Senate will be able to get that done. I understand that the nominee is on the business meeting for next week, so hopefully we can move that, Mr. Chairman. Can you speak to what role Russia is currently playing in Nagorno-Karabakh and any negotiations that are happening?
Thank you, Senator. And we agree with you on the need to get an ambassador out to Azerbaijan as soon as possible. On the role of Russia, as you know, Russia is the one that brokered the ceasefire between Armenia and Azerbaijan after the horrific violence in 2020. And they put themselves forward as peacekeepers and guarantors for the terms of that agreement. The United States was not at all involved, and in our assessment, and I think I'm safe to say in the assessment of Armenia and Azerbaijan, the Russians have not done what they were supposed to do. Just a few months ago, exactly a year ago, we saw violence flare up again on the Russian watch. So I think it's reasonable to demand that the Russians do their job to prevent further violence. I think it's also incumbent on the Russians to make sure that Lachin corridor is opened again. That's their responsibility as peacekeepers. We're doing our level best. We're not a party to that agreement, but we're doing our level best, and we will do more than our level best because we think it's absolutely urgent to get food into the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. Food, medical supplies should not be held hostage to political disputes, and we're going to continue to do that. I think the whole world should be asking what is Russia doing in Nagorno-Karabakh to help the situation.
Well, thank you. I very much appreciate that statement. Do they still have 2,000 peacekeepers on the ground, and are they actually doing anything, the people who are supposed to be the peacekeepers?
So we believe that they do have about that number of peacekeepers. We understand that their troops get supplies airdropped in by helicopter. We do note that the one truck that went in a couple of days ago is a Russian Red Cross truck. But again, that's not enough. That's not enough. That's not what the Russians took on as a responsibility to secure the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. And it's not what both the representatives of Nagorno-Karabakh and President Aliyev agreed to in principle, which was that they would open Lachin and other corridors immediately and simultaneously without delay.
Thank you. I don't have much time left, but I did want to raise the role of Georgia, because Georgia has previously played a constructive role in trying to facilitate negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And as we know, excuse me, the domestic political situation there is very challenging. I appreciate the response I received to a letter to Secretary Blinken and Administrator Powell with respect to a long-term election mission. Can you talk about why that might be helpful?
Georgia used to be the poster child for recovery and resilience and flourishing after the breakup of the Soviet Union. We have been discouraged to see a democratic backsliding in recent years. We want to make sure that we keep democratic institutions and practices front and center so that we are able to ensure that the Georgian government delivers on the will of the Georgian people, 85% of whom want to see their country in the EU. Sadly, Vice President of the European Council, Joseph Borrell, was just in Georgia and made clear that thus far the Georgian government has only met 3 of the 12 conditions to open up negotiations for EU membership. And that's a responsibility that the Georgian government has to bear. We want to see the Georgian government be more responsive to their people. And we would like to be in a position to work with them to help the country of Georgia and the people of Georgia take firm steps forward on their Euro-Atlantic path.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I could have just another minute or two. The letter that I received has the State Department pointing out that plans for a long-term election observation mission will be finalized in the coming months. But that timetable doesn't give us much time to actually prepare for what needs to happen in order to ensure a free and fair election. So can you tell me, has the government of Georgia agreed to a long-term election observation mission? And what happens to Georgia's accession agenda if next year's elections don't accurately reflect the will of the people?
Senator, if you'll allow, I'll get back to you on the specific timetable.
That would be great. I would really appreciate it. I think this is a place where, as you point out, we know that the people of Georgia are looking towards the EU. They want to assimilate with the West, and they want their government to move in that direction. And I think it's imperative for us to take every opportunity that we can to help them make that transition. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd ask unanimous consent to include, for the record, testimony from the Executive Director of the Armenian Assembly of America, and without objection, so ordered. One final question, Mr. Secretary. Let me ask you, why do you think, despite its signed commitments and a ruling by the International Court of Justice to open the Lachen corridor, that Ալիևը is not opening the corridor?
We could probably have that discussion in a different setting, sir.
What would be classified about a simple answer to a question as to why is he not keeping? We've discussed that there was a ceasefire, there was an agreement, there's been a judgment by the International Court of Justice, there's been attempts by the administration, there's an EU effort that he has not been cooperative with. Why would such a conversation need to be classified?
I think that there are elements, Mr. Chairman, that I would like to be able to discuss with you in a different setting.
Well, I'll give you an unclassified answer. He doesn't want to open the corridor because he is in the process of trying to subjugate these people by starvation or by the threat of starvation at the end of the day and subject them to his will. That doesn't have to be classified. I'm amazed sometimes. I've been doing this for 31 years. I'm amazed sometimes at what the department comes before this committee and says. I have other questions. I'll submit them for the record. There's a vote going on the Senate floor. With that, the record for this hearing will remain open until the close of business on Friday, September 15th. But thanks to the committee for your appearance. This hearing is adjourned.